Hello everyone, welcome back to Horror Mystery Rewind. Today we will talk about the horror movie Get Out. Please click on the closed caption for subtitles. Spoilers ahead. Enjoy and take care of yourself. A black man named Andre was walking alone in a quiet neighborhood when he was hit by a sketchy white car. Surprised, he turns around, but soon finds the car door open. Out of nowhere, the driver knocks him unconscious and drags him into the car. The next scene introduces us to our protagonist, Chris Washington, a black photographer who has just packed his bags. His white girlfriend Rose Armitage is at his door and wants to take him to her parents for the first time. Before they leave, Chris nervously asks her if her parents know he is black. Assure him that his parents don't have such hatred and they are not racist. On the drive there, Chris calls his best friend Rod, who works as an airport security guard, to thank him for taking care of the dog while he was on the trip with Rose. He then puts his call on the speaker as Rose wants to greet him, but Chris seems jealous after hearing the bond between the two. So, Rose teases him about it, but unexpectedly a jumping deer hits their windshield. Upon getting out of the car, they find one of the rearview mirrors broken, and Chris shocks the two when he finds a deer dead at the edge of the forest. They decided to call the police. The two then continue their journey, eventually arriving at Rose's childhood home, where it is clear that Rose's parents are rich. Her father, Dean Armitage, is a neurosurgeon, and her mother, Missy, is a psychiatrist. While the father takes him around for a tour of the house, Chris can't help but find it off-putting that the family's groundskeeper and housekeeper are both black. Finding Chris uncomfortable, Dean explains to him that both housekeepers and groundskeepers worked as caretakers for his parents. However, after his parents died, he couldn't bear the thought of letting them go, so he decided to keep them with him. Afterwards, the four sat on the porch and chatted while their parents announced they were having a house party tomorrow. Rice field. Here we also get to know that Chris' mother died in a road hit and run case when he was young. The topic seemed touchy, so the parents changed the subject and continued to talk about how they determined that Chris was a smoker based on his mannerisms. The father offers Chris to try Missy's hypnosis therapy, which Dean claims to be effective in helping get rid of that habit. While they chat, Georgina, the housekeeper, is pouring tea, and it's pretty clear that something's wrong with her. You can see her happy and nervous expression. Missy rudely tells the housekeeper to leave, but before we can see Chris' reaction, she is interrupted by Jeremy, Rose's younger brother, who has just returned from medical school. During dinner, a drunk Jeremy excitedly shares an embarrassing story about Rose in high school, while the housekeeper strangely lurks in the background. But afterwards the atmosphere grows tense as Jeremy begins asking Chris about how well of a fighter he is and mentions how black people's genetic makeup make them more physically strong compared to white people. Things get even weirder when Jeremy gets up from his seat and is about to challenge Chris for a fight. Luckily the parents put a stop to it before things escalate. When the couple is finally alone in Rose's room, she clearly screams about how strange and racist her family has been all day. She apologizes to Chris because she never thought her family would turn out like this. Later that night, Chris can't seem to get to sleep, so he decides to go outside to smoke a cigarette, but within seconds, he sees a creepy sign of groundskeeper Walter running straight toward him. But the man simply runs past him. Turning around, he finds Georgina at the window looking at her own reflection, apparently unable to see him. When Chris returns home, he finds Missy having tea in the therapy room, where she decides to join her. Yeah, Missy started asking about his smoking habits and she asked if she would like to try the treatment now. But before he could answer, she began stirring the tea. The grinding noise seemingly affecting Chris. She then starts to interrogate Chris about his activities around the time of his mother's passing. Even though Chris was hesitant to respond, the sound of the tea stirring persuades him to do so. As he continues to think back on that upsetting incident from his past, he starts to cry and soon feels paralyzed. As a finishing touch, Missy says one word sink, which makes him unconsciously feel as though he is inside his own head. He tries valiantly to reach up but is unable to. The sunken place, to use Missy's phrase. His consciousness has departed from his body while his body is still paralyzed in the chair. The next thing he knows, he finds himself in Rose's bed. He describes whatever happened last night as a nightmare in a text message to his closest friend Rod. He plugs in his mobile after noticing that his battery is low. He makes the decision that day to get outside and take photos of his surroundings. He visits Walter the groundskeeper and tries to strike up a conversation with him. His eyes seem far away, and his accent sounds like it belongs to a white person from the 1950s, thus we can also tell that something is strange about him here. He also brings up Chris' smoking problem and inquires as to whether yesterday night's treatment session with Missy was successful. Chris now understands that his dream was actually a reality. Chris tells his girlfriend right away about the hypnosis he had, which causes her to apologize for what her mother did. He also learns that the hypnosis was successful since he has lost the urge to smoke. After that, the two observe through the window as a large group of wealthy white people arrive for the Armitage family's yearly gathering. Old white people make up the majority of the attendees, and when they see Chris, they start acting strangely. Because Tiger Woods is an accomplished golfer, one elderly man appears intrigued to learn if Chris is as well. Another woman they run into queries Rose about if Chris is better in bed since he is black. Finally, Chris and Rose entertain another elderly couple who make the disgusting comment that having black skin is now fashionable. So, he moves on. He makes the decision to scout the area for any nice view to capture on camera. At this point, he discovers Logan King, a fellow Black Party member, and chooses to approach him. But like Walter, he speaks and behaves like an elderly white man, and soon his weirdly elderly wife approaches him and tells him that someone wants to see him. Chris gets further distracted by Logan's apparent lack of understanding of how a fist bump functions as he excuses himself. Later on, Chris finds a blind man at the party named Jim Hudson whose name Chris recognizes as he is a well-known art curator who eventually grew blind from a genetic disease. Unlike the others who bring up Chris' race into conversations, the man admits being a fan of his work and compliments Chris for having a great eye in photography. As Chris grows tired of meeting people at the party, he heads upstairs. While remaining hidden from him, everyone in the group suddenly quiets down and starts to gaze up. Even though he recalls charging his phone earlier, he frowns when he enters Rose's room and sees the phone charger unplugged. He looks in the other room out of curiosity and discovers Georgina there, believing that she must have disconnected his phone. When he later tells Rose about Georgina's actions, Rose doesn't think the housekeeper had evil intent. Chris calls Rod after some time passes in the room to catch him up and inform him that Rose's mother put him under hypnosis to help him stop smoking. These freaks Rod out, and he adds how many white people like using others as sexual slaves. Chris, however, reassures him that everything will be alright. Georgina, who likewise sounds like an elderly white person and doesn't comprehend any modern lingo, suddenly interrupts him. Chris then queries her as to whether being surrounded by so many white people makes him feel threatened. When she hears this, she initially appears to be trying to speak, but then stops herself and begins to sob. Instead, she claims that the Armitage family treats her like family before leaving oddly. When Chris goes back downstairs, he discovers Dean conversing with a group of senior citizens. Chris is asked by one of them whether being black nowadays is advantageous or disadvantageous. Chris takes this opportunity to summon Logan to get him to answer. Why he secretly takes out his phone to take a picture to show his best friend Rod because he feels like he recognizes Logan. But unfortunately, he forgot to turn off his flash. And as soon as the camera snaps, Logan has a nosebleed. He then becomes hysterical and grabs Chris while screaming at him to get out. The next shot shows the man being led away. According to Dean, Logan is sensitive, and the camera flash triggered his reaction. Logan then exits Missy's therapy room. After saying he feels much better now and would like to go home with his wife to rest, Dean invites the visitor to take part in a party game to lighten the mood. Rose, however, decides to take Chris for a walk after noticing that he appears unhappy. The family and the visitor begin a strange auction with Chris as the winner while they are gone. The highest bidder is the blind Jim Hudson, who is emerging. In the end, meanwhile in the woods, Chris confesses that ever since the hypnosis he's been feeling weird things and that he feels as if he recognized Logan when the man was freaking out earlier. He also expresses how he wants to go home, so Rose agrees and they plan to return to the city in the morning. When they return to the house, the sun has set and the last of the visitors are loading up their vehicles to leave. Chris sends Rod his best friend's photo of Logan while he is alone in Rose's room. As it turns out, Rod is acquainted with Andre Hayward, who formerly dated one of their acquaintances. After Chris describes how the man appears to have changed his name and now appears to be dating an elderly woman, Rod starts to worry. Chris' phone battery runs out, though cutting off their conversation. Realizing that something is off, Chris informs Rose that they have to leave now. Rose doesn't mind, though she has to get her bag back first. When Rose left him alone in his room, the sight of the open cupboard fascinated him, so he decided to check it out. At this point, he discovered various photos of Rose in previous relationships with several black boys, not just guys, but also pictures of her with Walter and Georgina. Apparently, Chris wasn't the first black man Rose had been with. After all the sudden Rose comes back in to tell him that she's ready to go, though she can't seem to find her car keys in her bag. Not wanting to waste any more time, Chris urges her to go downstairs, but the brother Jeremy is blocking the front door while Missy stands in the hallway with her tea ready. Sensing tension in the air, Chris asks Rose to find the key. While Dean walks in the room and starts talking about how the white mind is brilliant though it needs a better vessel to contain. It creeped out Chris and he loses his patience, begins yelling for Rose to find the keys. Jeremy then playfully swings his lacrosse stick at him, while Missy and Dean begin to surround him. While this happens, Rose finally reveals to him that she's in on her family's plans all along. When Chris dives at Jeremy, Missy taps her teacup, causing him to fall under hypnosis again. Missy let Chris lose power and he watched his family drag him down to the basement. Meanwhile, in the city, Rod begins to worry. He tries to call Chris several times but gets no answer. That night, he decided to Google Andre and discovered an article of his about a missing person. Back to Chris, he finds himself tied to a chair when he wakes up and unable to free himself despite his efforts. The television in front of him suddenly turned on and played a recording of a white man, none other than Rose's grandfather. He started talking about how Chris was chosen because of his genetic advantage of being a black person. Then, a recording of the tea stirring takes place, knocking Chris unconscious again. On the next day, Rod goes to the police trying to report how he suspects that his friend Chris is being held hostage by a white family. He explains that they kidnap black people to be sex slaves, but the police only laugh at him. This doesn't stop Rod. He tries calling Chris' phone one more time, but this time it's Rose who answers. She pretends to act confused, saying that Chris called a cab abruptly and left 2 days ago, but Rod could see through her lies. However, when Rod begins recording their call, Rose shows her manipulative side by changing the subject and saying that she knows how badly Rod wants her, which weirds him out and gets him to hang up. While this is going on, Chris wakes up again in the basement to find blind John Hudson on the TV. He calmly explains to Chris that a surgical procedure is going to happen which involves transplanting his brain into Chris' body. Once this is completed, Chris' consciousness wouldn't be entirely gone, but he will be a passenger in his own body sinking in the sunken place. It turned out that Rose's family had transferred the consciousness of old whites to the bodies of young blacks, granting them preferred physical features and a form of immortality. But in John's case, he mainly wanted Chris' eyes. After the call ended, Chris noticed the cotton ball protruding from his armrest just before the TV recording started again, forcing Chris to prepare to pass out. Right in the other room, Dean started the brain transplant procedure while Jeremy went to pick up Chris. He unbuckled the straps that were holding Chris to the chair and prepared for the combination. However, when he was not ready, Chris hit him with a lacrosse racket. It is revealed that Chris blocked the hypnotic activation by covering his ears with cotton wool taken from the chair. He looked at the mounted deer on the wall and got another idea. Since Jeremy hasn't returned for some time, Dean goes out to look for him, and this time Chris shows up and pushes the deer horns into him, causing him to bleed to death. The evil man knocks over a candle which sets fire to the operating room with the sedated Jim Hudson inside. Up next, Chris goes upstairs and comes face to face with the mother, knocking the teacup off the table before she reaches for it. She then takes a sharp object and stabs his palm with it. As the two struggle against each other, Chris manages to overpower her and stab her in the eye. When he finally makes it to the front door, a bloody Jeremy shows up and traps him in a headlock while he struggles to reach for the door. Chris manages to stab him and then stomps his skull to make sure he stays dead. This time, while this is going on, Rose is upstairs listening to music and searching shirtless pictures of black men, unaware of what's going on. Chris finds the car keys and starts Rose's car. However, as soon as he begins to accelerate, he accidentally hits Georgina on his way out. Feeling sorry for her because his own mother also died from a hit and run, he takes her inside the car. Unfortunately, Rose heard the crash and rushed outside with a rifle while saying "Grandma." It is the time when we realize that Georgina has the grandmother's brain. She then wakes up and begins attacking Chris, infuriated because he's killed her family. This causes a car crash, killing Georgina, but Chris survives after the car crash. Chris staggers outside the car, avoiding Rose's gunshot. Out of nowhere, Walter the groundskeeper comes running towards him with Rose saying, "Get him, Grandpa." Walter tackles him to the ground, but Chris is quick to take a picture of him with the flash camera, which snaps the real person inside him awake. Walter asks for Rose's rifle, wanting to take care of Chris, but he shoots her in the gut instead. He then shoots himself down. Afterwards, Chris crawls up towards Rose and begins choking her out of contempt, but doesn't have the heart to kill her. Then suddenly a police car arrives, and Rose cries out for help, but luckily it is an airport security car which belongs to none other than his best friend Ron. The two quietly climb inside the car and drive away, leaving Rose to bleed to death in the middle of the street. If you like the video, subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and click on like to help the channel out. Thank you and take care.